Welcome into this week's The Women's Basketball Podcast, your one-stop shop for all things WNBA, women's college hoops, and oh so much more. Mia O'Brien, joined as I am each and every week by my co-host, the illustrious, as one Rebecca Kopelman likes to call him, the mythical Mitchell Northam of SB Nation. Mitch, how are you doing on this fine June Monday evening that we are recording on?
I'm good. Got out on the Blackstone earlier and made some hot dogs, and I'm just chilling. It's been a good day.
Love it. We had some pork chops. It is grilling season, and boy, oh boy, do we have some WNBA teams that we are going to grill on today's episode. But first, as we do each and every week on the Women's Basketball Podcast, let's begin with our Her of the Week. This is a player, Mitch, who we talked about last episode, Brittany Sykes and the Reclamation Project in Washington. Certainly, I think I speak for both of us when I say we are buying the Mystic stock. We are buying the Princeton offense that has been implemented in, I will say, and I know as a Maryland native, this may upset you, the DMV. They did play a game in Baltimore last week, upsetting the Indiana Fever. But I think that Brittany Sykes in particular, who her last 2 to 3 years, obviously injuries ravaged her career, but the fact that she is fourth in scoring in the W, we're just less than a month into the season, but it's obviously a massive revelation for someone who, I don't want to say the Mystics will go as far as she goes, but is providing that veteran leadership to a team that was expected to be one of the youngest in the W.
Yeah. Just before I started on Brittany Sykes, Baltimore is not the DMV. Baltimore is Baltimore.
And that is,
I
wanted you to say it, not me.
That's fine.
I needed the Maryland native
I
to
had
say
someone else ask me that. They're like, is Baltimore part of the DMV? And I think there was actually like a Mystics thing. Like one of the players said, oh, we're in the DMV. No, you're in Baltimore.
I blame Angel Reese for the misinformation. Sorry, Angel. Because this notion of, well, she is from Baltimore. No, she's from Howard County. She went to high school in Baltimore. There's a
indeed. Yep. Yeah. So, but Brittany Sykes, the number that jumps out to me, other than the fact that she's fourth in the league in scoring, is she's averaging 11.2 free throw attempts per game, which is number one in the league. And it is far more than she has ever averaged before. Last season, she was at 3.1 free throw attempts per game. And that's close to her career high. She's never averaged north of 3.8. And all of a sudden this season, she's just getting to the line a lot and a lot more. She has the ball in her hands a lot, right? I mean, she's sort of, the bus driver of this team. They do have a lot of really good parts and a lot of really good rookies. We've talked about Sonia Citron and Kiki Iriafen, and they have some other good players as well. But 4.5 assists per game as well. That's 12th in the league. So she's doing a little bit of everything for the Mystics, and I think they're using her in the right way, and they're just kind of leaning into what their strengths are. And I might have to eat some crow on the Mystics hire. I thought that coaching search was a little bit weird, and I thought that hire was a little bit weird, but the early returns have been pretty solid. And maybe that's a big part of that is who they've drafted and who they've signed and how this roster has kind of come together. But, getting it done there in Washington.
We will also be eating crow when it comes to our lead in this week's starting five. Mitch, 2 weeks ago, we sat in these very seats and we proclaimed the Indiana Fever as the greatest proof of concept of building around a superstar, adding pieces, saying, you know what, our window isn't going to be 2 to 3 years down the line. It is now. We are getting rid of Christy Sides. We're bringing Steph White in. We're bringing DeWanna Bonner in. We are finding as many veterans as we can, pushing all of our chips to the middle of the table because the time is now for Caitlin Clark, Aaliyah Boston, and company. And all they have done in the last 2 weeks, Mitch,
just catch L's.
Lay a bunch of goose eggs, including to the aforementioned Washington Mystics, an 83-77 win for Washington, as alluded to, in Baltimore, not Baltimore County, Baltimore, the city. For me, Mitch, I do want to say we were correct last week when we sat here and we said, if the Indiana Fever play through Aaliyah Boston, who is enjoying one of the best starts to a season in her young career, they will be okay. The problem is that they are not playing through Aaliyah Boston. And when they are, if they can actually complete a pass inside into the paint to Aaliyah Boston, when you complete the outlet pass, yes, then we're seeing numbers like 5 of 5 and 6 of 8 to begin a game. But the problem is the Fever are turning the ball over left and right because they can't feed Aaliyah Boston. Kelsey Mitchell is chucking up threes like there's no tomorrow. And meanwhile, the rest of this team is really not having success from beyond the arc, which was supposed to be an area where, given the state and the art of Caitlin Clark's game, even without Caitlin, the expectation was you were going to surround her with capable shooters from the floor. The stat for me that really sticks out as we try to dissect what is wrong with the Fever, Mitch, is the fact that against the Connecticut Sun, they attempted just 17 threes. The New York Liberty, who we'll get to later in today's show, attempted 19 threes last time out in the first half. And that is where a lot of my concerns come from. This was supposed to be an offense that Sophie Cunningham, DeWanna Bonner were all very vocal about with Steph White. There's free flowing of motion. There's opportunities to shoot. And yet I feel like the only player who is taking an opportunity to have the green light in Caitlin Clark's absence and shoot from beyond the arc is Kelsey Mitchell, who perhaps that broken finger she suffered in China actually may have required a little bit more surgery or time away from basketball than she actually took. What say you?
Yeah, that loss to the Connecticut Sun, Kelsey Mitchell 0 for 4 from beyond the arc, 4 for 15 from the floor. I think in addition to, making sure your good three-point shooters are taking and making threes, I would feed the ball to Aaliyah Boston a lot more than they are right now.
Thank you.
Aaliyah Boston was 8 of 10 shooting in that game against the Sun. Why didn't she take 5 more shots?
Started 5 of 5, by the way. Started 5 of 5 as well.
The other thing that stands out is Aaliyah Boston led them in assists by a wide margin that game. She had 8 assists. Aaliyah Boston is a very good passer. She probably should not be leading your team in assists, though, on a regular basis. She should be the one benefiting from assists and getting the ball under the basket and going to work down to the post, which is what she's so good at. I can excuse the loss to the Mystics. I can excuse the loss to the Liberty. The Connecticut Sun are not a good basketball team, and you lost to them at home. And I know that you're without Caitlin Clark. I know Sid Colson got hurt in this game. Quite frankly, Sid Colson should not be that important to your team where, you can't win a game, where she goes out. And, when she goes out, they sort of have a crisis of confidence in terms of that position at point guard. And, we'll get it into our next topic there, but, they got to figure some things out. I still think that this is kind of a blessing in disguise for them because, you can afford to have some of these losses early. It's a long season, but they are really getting, I think, some of their weaknesses exposed. The other thing is I think they need a little bit more from DeWanna Bonner. Yep. I know she's a little bit older, but she was one of their big free agent acquisitions. And I think that you can ask a little bit more of her, especially in the situation that they're in now where they're without Caitlin Clark and they're struggling to win games.
3 massive threes in the final quarter of that loss to the Sun. Actually, the reason that the Fever came back to briefly take their first lead since the first quarter was courtesy of DeWanna Bonner. But to your point, Mitch, that was the first time she really has shown up on the offensive end of the floor since coming to the Fever. Hey, let's hit number 2 in this week's starting 5. You have the floor because the Fever did make an acquisition earlier in the day on Monday that certainly fortifies a backcourt that, yes, is without Caitlin Clark for at least the next 2 games. Steph White did say that Sid Colson and one Sophie Cunningham continue to progress nicely. She said it's probably the best case scenario for both players that the team could hope for. But for Sid Colson, it's an upper leg injury. For Sophie Cunningham, it's once again that ankle that sidelined her the first week of the season. But there's help on the way, although Mitch has a little bit of beef with the W.
Yeah, I just so I saw this today. The Fever signed Aari McDonald, and it's a really good signing for the Indiana Fever. It immediately addresses a need we just talked about. They need point guard depth. They need someone who can handle the ball, who can shoot the ball, who can all those things from beyond the perimeter. Aari McDonald is a really good player. She averaged 9 points and about 4 assists per game last season. I mean, a really, really good, solid rotational player, someone that you can rely on as your second backup, your backup point guard, someone you can bring off the bench to play well along the perimeter. I was kind of surprised. I guess maybe this is my fault for not paying that close of attention that she was available, that she was a free agent. And my immediate thought was a player of Aari McDonald's caliber in any other American pro sports league. All the stats that I just talked about, like really solid rotation player, on a bad team could be a starter, on a really good team could be, one of your first guards off the bench. She would not be available in any of these other leagues. She would not be available, if you equate her to what her equivalent is in the NBA. She wouldn't be available for the Fever to pick up. And I think for me, it's just another sign that, like, these rosters are too small. And we need more roster spots. I'm sure that the Sparks didn't really want to let her go, but they had to make some tough choices, as they got to the deadline to trim their roster size down. That they decided to waive her and make her available. And now they're, whatever you want to call it, the Fever are benefiting from that at this point. So I feel like it's another example of just the roster sizes are too small. We need to make this better. We need to expand this. Aari McDonald shouldn't have been a free agent. She was second in Rookie of the Year voting not that long ago. Really good player, and I think she's going to help out the Fever a lot.
One thing for me, Aari McDonald was part of that viral moment last year when the Fever played the Sparks, and that she was picking up Caitlin Clark at 94 feet and maybe getting in her grill a little bit. And people had a lot of fun with that one on social. And now they're teammates, which that makes for a lot of fun. But I also bring it up to say this, Mitch. I think even after Caitlin Clark returns, depending, yes, on the status of Sid Colson and Sophie Cunningham, I'd like to see McDonald kept around because I want to see Caitlin Clark have the ability to play off the ball. Yeah. Because at this point in time, to go back to number one in this week's starting five, Aaliyah Boston is your best option to run the ball and move the ball up and down the floor, not Kelsey Mitchell, which is a bit jarring considering she, could also perhaps be a primary focal point of the offense. I don't know, or maybe be the primary ball handler. She did that at Ohio State, was all right. So that's where I would actually think this is a really great opportunity for McDonald, because I do think that this was an oversight, or at the very least, they just thought, okay, well, we're just going to slap Sid Colson on it. Caitlin hasn't missed significant time in 7 years. We're fine. And now, obviously, it is a major factor because when you don't have someone actually running the show and running the floor, you're asking Aaliyah Boston to basically play 5 spots at once. Back to the roster situation, there has been an argument the last few weeks nationally, chicken or the egg. Do you make the rosters bigger or do you add more teams? What comes first?
I think that the players want the rosters to be bigger. I think the owners want there to be more teams, because if you're an owner, you don't want to pay for extra roster spots because that means that you got to write more checks for those roster spots. Whereas if you just add more teams, okay, those roster spots are new owner's problem, whoever comes into the league is an expansion franchise. But yeah, I think the players want more roster spots. I think I interviewed, I think it was Rickea Jackson when I was at For the Win maybe a year ago or so. And I asked her kind of this basic question. I was like, do you want to see more teams or more roster spots? And I'm pretty sure she told me she wanted to see more roster spots. So I think that's where, it's probably going to be a talking point among, the CBA negotiations coming up. I think you're going to see, like, I hope that more roster spots are added. Like, can we just get to 13? Can we just add one more? Can we add, like, practice player spots? Can we, something else? The other problem is like there is no G League or developmental league or equivalent to the WNBA right now. So it's not like, oh, I can sign this player to a two-way and ship them back and forth between Indiana and Sioux Falls or whatever, Greensboro and Atlanta or whatever we're talking about. So yeah, I think those are some of the problems that we're having right now as the WNBA gets bigger. Maybe there are some problems that can be solved along the way.
Maybe that's an opportunity for our friends at the Upshot League, but also that is a story for another time. Let's keep it moving with this week's starting five. Speaking, somehow all of these storylines revolve around the Indiana Fever's just absolute collapse. It's not a collapse, folks. Rebecca Lobo said on ESPN earlier today, people have a 5 on the 1 to 10 panic meter. You should be at a 2. Two of their losses, yes, Caitlin Clark played in both those games that combined 3 points, but they did lose to the Connecticut Sun. They did hand the Sun their first victory of the 2025 season. Marina Mabry was awesome in that game, 26 points, 5 boards. She was 4 of 9 from 3. It felt like a whole heck of a lot more. And then the Sun got boat raced on Sunday by the undefeated New York Liberty, Mitch. And this is where number 3 on this week's starting 5 comes in. In case you missed it, folks, Marina Mabry, my fellow Jersey Shore Conference product, 8 points, 4 boards, 2 assists. Okay, not a great night at the office. In 28 minutes, her plus minus, minus 55.
That's not what you want.
It's got to be a record, right? Like, I don't think it's been proven to have been a record, but it has to be a record.
Not what you want. I still don't really understand why the Connecticut Sun refused to trade her. This is not a good basketball team. And that's fine. But I don't think anybody thought this was going to be a good basketball team this year. I just don't really know why they have refused to do this. If I were running the Connecticut Sun, I would put a price on Marina Mabry. I would say she is worth 1 first-round draft pick. And people, you can come make your bids. And, if you want to sweeten those bids with a second-round pick or a cheap young player or something like that, I'd say come get her. Because, she's not really – I just don't really understand what her purpose is there. And it's clear that she does not want to be there. And voiced as much over the summer, or over the off season rather, when she demanded a trade and was told, no, you're stuck here. We will lock you inside of the casino. I don't get it. I would trade her because you're not going anywhere this year. You're not making the playoffs. Just embrace the youth movement and embrace the suck for a year and then figure out some things next off season. But you're not winning anything big this year with Marina Mabry.
And it's really crazy. I was almost about to say the words Haley Peters, Mitch, because we debunked on a previous episode that there are several players on the Connecticut Sun who have never played in the WNBA, or if they have, it was about 10, 15 years ago, who are a member of the rotation for the Sun. Marina Mabry leads all players. She averages over 30 minutes per contest for the Sun. And that's where, to your point, it's a square peg in a circle hole. And yet she has to play by virtue of what the rest of the roster looks like. I still don't really know what the deal is with Anissa Morrow. Why not just trot her out there and make her a focal point? And maybe she's not fully healthy. Yes, I understand you have Tina Charles, the ageless wonder. Sanaya Rivers has come on, someone who you are obviously very familiar with from her college days. I don't understand it, but I will say this. After the Fever lost to the Sun and Marina Mabry it felt like she couldn't miss from beyond the arc. I may or may not have fired off a few texts to friends where I was like, can the Fever trade for her? Can the Fever trade for her? And then the next time out, she posts a minus 55 plus minus. So maybe not. Maybe the Fever don't need Marina Mabry. Maybe they just need extra point guards.
Maybe so. Tina Charles is somebody who, I understand her role on the Sun. It is to be, and it seems to me like she wants to be there. Or she would have signed somewhere else, right? She's a free agent that came there. She wasn't stuck there already like Marina Mabry. She's there to be the veteran presence, to kind of walk Sanaya Rivers and Anissa Morrow, to the path of, getting through their first rookie season and everything. And she's there to chase her, her records, right? She's pretty close, I think, to the rebounding record and all the other things. So I get why she's there. Marina Mabry, not really sure what you guys are doing with her.
I promise this week's entire starting 5 is not entirely about the Indiana Fever. Number 5, at least, is not. Number 4 is. Mitch, the floor is yours. We have another Caitlin Clark point that needs to be made.
Yeah, so I kind of came to this point, this take that I'm working on over the past week and a half. Because, there is a certain USA Today columnist who writes a lot about Caitlin Clark, and every time she opens her mouth about Caitlin Clark, she prefaces it with or has to mention that also she covered Tiger Woods. And you have to know that as an audience member, that when Christine Brennan talks about Caitlin Clark, she also covered Tiger Woods. She's also covered the Olympics, Mitch, and the U.S. women's basketball team since the early 80s. Continue. Yes. And even her tweets and her Blue Sky posts, she has to mention Tiger Woods when she mentions Caitlin Clark. I also heard Colin Cowherd make this point of comparing Caitlin Clark to Tiger Woods, and I think that comparison is misplaced. I think we should stop comparing Caitlin Clark to Tiger Woods for a couple of reasons, and I will give everyone another male athlete that we can compare her to that kind of did similar things in their sport. I think that we, instead of Tiger Woods, we can compare Caitlin Clark to Dale Earnhardt. And so if you walk down this path with me, so the kind of the first, I think, big thing here is like the roots of all of these three people. You know, Tiger Woods grew up in California. He had a golf club put in his hand before he could walk. His dad molded him into this golfer that he eventually became. He also went to Stanford. There's not a whole lot about Tiger Woods' story that is like blue collar or workmanlike, not to say he didn't work hard. But he also went into a sport that can be pretentious and white collar and alienating to a lot of folks in America. Caitlin Clark grew up in Iowa. She went to Iowa. She is from the heart of the Midwest, small town America. You know, works hard to turn herself into this 3-point shooter. You know, this style and this phenom that she is. She kind of came into basketball and was like, "This is how I'm going to win. I'm going to be a better 3-point shooter than everybody else. I'm going to take shots from the logo." Dale Earnhardt's story kind of similar. Yeah, he had a daddy who, you know, experienced some success in racing and was a local hero, but he wasn't rich. He, you know, died too young to give his son a head start in the business. His father didn't want him to race. He didn't graduate from high school. In his early beginnings in racing, he was broke and in a whole lot of debt. And his cars weren't the best or the fastest, but he raced them hard and he was fearless. So he kind of had his own style. Like, you know, we keep talking about like how Caitlin Clark is a little bit like Steph Curry in the way that she's kind of reinventing basketball with the 3-pointers. You could say that Dale Earnhardt kind of reinvented NASCAR a little bit with the way he raced, you know, with the way of get out of my way, I'm the intimidator, I will run you off the track. Tiger Woods didn't really do that in golf. You know, you can only really play golf one way. He was just better than everybody else. My second point in this is, you know, Tiger Woods was the first and really the only star of color in his sport. You know, not too many years before he won the Masters, Black people weren't even allowed to play at Augusta. He very much is the Jackie Robinson of his sport. He broke the barriers. He got death threats. He did what no other person of color has ever done in professional golf. And as soon as Tiger Woods messed up, those old white men were there to wag their finger at him. Caitlin Clark has not endured this type of racism. As much as like people like to kind of be hyperbolic about that, full stop, like it's not what she has to deal with. And Dale Earnhardt didn't have to deal with this either. I think the way that she's growing the WNBA is similar to the way that Earnhardt helped thrust NASCAR into the mainstream through being really, really good, but also through marketing. He had Wrangler and Goodrich and Coca-Cola, and she's got Nike and State Farm and Gatorade. And every time you go to a women's basketball game now, it's likely that you'll see someone wearing a Caitlin jersey. And every time you go to a NASCAR race, still 25 years after his death, you see people wearing the number 3. I think it's also a little ironic that I'm talking about Dale Earnhardt and his number is 3. Caitlin, famous for making 3-pointers. But all that is a little bit tougher to do with golf, right? Like we don't see, like there's no iconic like Tiger thing you can wear except for like maybe the Sunday red, you know, polo that he kind of popularized. But, you know, all in all, I think the racism point and sort of the breaking barriers point is a big thing that people miss when they talk about the Tiger Caitlin thing. And my last thing on this topic is the rivals. Like Tiger Woods never really had a rival. I think some people can make the case for Phil Mickelson, but like if we're being honest, there was no one as good as him from 1997 to 2009, pretty much. No one was better. He was just the best golfer out there, and he was dominated. I think Caitlin Clark has real rivals, and I think that Dale Earnhardt had real rivals. Rivals in their same peer group, rivals that are part of kind of an older guard that see them coming into the league and kind of shaping up things, and they don't really like what they're doing and how they're doing it, but they don't care. You know, I think, you know, there were a lot of drivers. I've kind of been on this Dale Earnhardt kick because I've just watched this documentary about him on Amazon, which is really, really good. You know, there were a lot of drivers and fans that saw him as the villain, and he embraced that when he went from the Wrangler color scheme to the Goodwrench and adopted kind of the Darth Vader paint scheme with the red and black. And I think you can kind of make the same case with Caitlyn. Like, a lot of people love her and she has an enormous fan base, but we're kidding ourselves if we try to say that she's universally liked. There are some players in this league that have already shown and told us that they don't like her. It's clear that Angel and Caitlyn do not like each other. And that's perfectly okay, as we've said before on this podcast.
Good for the sport.
Yes, absolutely. I think there are times when Caitlyn embraces that villain role. And meanwhile, I don't think anybody in golf really viewed Tiger Woods as the villain. He was just kind of like the savior for the sport. Like, I don't think he was ever really like, once he
until he cheated on his wife, or at least it became public knowledge, and then she tried to hit him with the golf club.
It was stuff off the golf course that, made him do that a little bit, but I don't think he ever really embraced it in the same way that Dale and Caitlyn have.
No, I don't think he could handle it. I mean, that's why he crumbled emotionally and physically from 2009 to 2019. I think it was in large part due to the stress of the failure of his marriage, the disgrace that became his name, and he couldn't deal with the public pressure, quite frankly, which is insane for someone who dealt with the pressure on a golf course for decades upon decades up to that point. And in that same vein, yes, I think that Caitlin Clark and Dale Earnhardt said, bring it on. I'll use it as fuel, just like my rivals are using the dismay towards them because they're not me as fuel.
Yeah. And then, you can kind of draw comparisons between their rivalries. Like, there's the contemporary rival. For Dale, that was Darryl Waltrip. For Caitlyn, that's Angel Reese. For the old guard who might feel a bit slighted or feel like they're being pushed out of the way by the new young star, for Dale, that was Richard Petty. For Caitlyn, that might be Angel Wilson. Last season it was Diana Taurasi, and who was very vocal about that. Asia hasn't kind of quite been as forthcoming about that, but we'll see. Like,
Wars, you can check out our previous podcast about it.
For sure. And eventually, I think, at some point, Caitlyn is going to encounter her own Jeff Gordon, where Caitlyn kind of gets into her point in the league where maybe she's won a couple MVPs or maybe a couple titles, and maybe she's approaching her 30s, and now this new young player comes in and starts to take her block. So that's my take. We should compare Caitlyn to Dale Earnhardt, not Tiger Woods.
I love the take. I want the mic to drop right now, the sound effect mic drop, because yes to all of it, and I'm very excited to watch the Earnhardt documentary on Amazon. Might Caitlin Clark's Jeff Gordon be Paige Beckers? Paige Beckers, of course, remains in the WNBA's concussion protocol, so she has not played the last 2 times out for the Dallas Wings. That's where we'll wrap up this week's starting 5. I told you it wasn't going to all be Caitlin Clark and Indiana Fever centric. Mitch, did you see, and look, I want to say that we were the first podcast that had questions about the coaching staff in Dallas, comparing not just the infrastructure around Paige Beckers to the first half of the 2024 Indiana Fever led by Christy Sides. With all due respect to our buddy Chris, he's the new PE teacher in the WNBA. This is insane. Did you see that? This is like insane to me. And so a reporter asks, with 2 players, so Nalissa Smith and Dejanay Carrington are with their head coach at the podium, and they're asked, what's the key to closing out close games? And their head coach says togetherness. And in real time, Dejanay Carrington gives him the biggest side eye and just like looks at the ground like this. Like, what are we doing here? What are we doing here? And that's where I have to say, look, I mean, we just alluded to it with the Washington Mystics. And certainly the Los Angeles Sparks have been ravaged by injuries, but Kelsey Plum is enjoying a renaissance. So I think our friend Lynn Roberts is doing a pretty good job of transitioning from the college game to the pros. Our friend Carl Semesco in Atlanta certainly is. We haven't even gotten to them on today's episode. But yeah, the transition is not going too well from college to the pros in Dallas, needless to say.
Yeah. I think that Chris K is a little bit out of his depth. If just completely honest,
it's June 2nd, and we are giving him the Christy Sides of the Year award.
Yeah, I kind of thought this when I saw him in Minnesota. When I saw the Lynx play the Dallas Wings and went to I went to the post-game press conference there and everything, and I'm just not sure this was the right hire for the Dallas Wings. And he kind of strikes me as as Kurt's teacher pet kind of thing. Like, I'm not 100% sold on like that he was ready to be a WNBA head coach, and also to not only just be a head coach of any WNBA team, but to be the head coach of a WNBA team that has this many different and distinct personalities on it. When you talk about Dejanay Carrington and Alyssa Smith and Enrique Ogunbowale, and oh, by the way, the number 1 overall pick in Paige Beckers. And so far, like, the returns aren't good, and like they're gonna lose a lot of games this year. And I don't really know how that turns around. You know, it's not going to turn it around? Togetherness, like, and that's sort of just like college coach speak. Like, that's not going to work. This is the pros. You need to win games. Togetherness and buzzwords like that, like, aren't going to get it done. So, best of luck. I don't think this is going to work. But we'll see.
A starting 5 would not be complete without Mitch and I having to do a Brian Windhorst meme. Is this a play by Curt Miller to become the head coach of the Dallas Wings in year 2 of Paige Beckers?
I don't think so. I think that Curt Miller really wanted Chris to work, because I think if he wanted to be the head coach, he would have just made himself the head coach before, you know, the time came to hire a head coach. But yeah, I mean, when I just see like that team on TV, and then when I saw them in person at the press conference, like, Curt is kind of always around. Like, he was in the press conference in Minnesota when I was there, just kind of standing on the wall and sort of just like looking at the players and at Chris. I don't know. It's just kind of a weird vibe. I'm not sure if it works. The jury is still out on Curt Miller, the GM. Like, he might not be a good GM. Chris might not be a good head coach. Sometimes it just doesn't work that way. I think Curt Miller is a proven coach. I think it was still kind of silly for the Sparks to fire him after 1 year. You know, he had a really great run in Connecticut where he won a lot of games and went to the finals and the whole thing. So, yeah, I don't know. But, you know, great head coaches don't always make good GMs. Right. See also the last couple of years of Bill Belichick's tenure in New England.
Words out of my mouth. Besides Brian Windhorst, Bill Belichick is another. Like, check it off your bingo card. It has happened on this week's the Women's Basketball Podcast.
Yeah. So yeah, I think the jury is still out on a lot of things for the Dallas Wings, but certainly things are not heading in the right direction.
That is this week's starting 5. Speaking of things that are weird, let's get to this week's beef of the week. That's weird, as well as the super sleuthing. There's always super sleuthing going on in WNBA Twitter and WNBA Blue Sky. But this one is wacky to me, Mitch. Heard from a couple friends that Rickea Jackson, which I have her Instagram pulled up right now, that she had scrubbed her Instagram of anything Sparks. I do still see some posts with regards to the Los Angeles Sparks. She hasn't played, though, the last 2 times out due to personal reasons. That was after suffering a concussion earlier in the 2025 season. A lot of speculation online that perhaps she could be asking for a trade. I don't know where this beef is coming from. We sat here 1 week ago and we noted how, look, they've been dealt a bad hand with injuries to Ray Burrell. Certainly, Cam Brink is still on her way back from the ACL tear she suffered last June. But I don't know where this is coming from. But the fact that we've got super sleuths on the internet trying to make it beef, for me, it qualifies as this week's beef of the week.
Yeah, I saw something where she, I guess there was a rumor going around that she was pregnant, and she kind of made fun of that on Twitter, and then maybe deleted that post. So there's something weird going on here with Rickea Jackson, and I'm not entirely sure what it is. I'm not entirely sure if the Sparks even know what it is. I don't know. This is definitely a weird situation. I mean, I just went to go check Rickea Jackson's mom's Twitter account, because a couple weeks ago we got that, like, please keep her in her prayers, in your prayers tweet from her. Haven't seen anything new from Rickea Jackson's mom. So yeah, I'm not sure what's up there, but it's a weird situation. It's kind of our weird situation of the year so far in the WNBA, where we always have a couple of those. But I don't know what the solution to this is. Maybe they can trade her to the Sun for Marina Mabrey.
Well, you could check another box off your bingo card of this week's episode, because I would also like to introduce a little NFL nugget, and of course, Rickea Jackson's boyfriend, James Pierce, former edge rusher, Tennessee, first-round pick of the Atlanta Falcons. I would like to once again just remind you all, unsolicited at the NFL Scouting Combine. I had more than one personnel, executive, staffer, scout, multiple teams come up to me and note not only his personality, James Pierce's personality being perhaps a little concerning, but that there was a, quote, toxic relationship between him and Rickea and what that would mean for teams that may or may not decide to draft the Tennessee edge rusher. So check it off your bingo card. Mia put an NFL reference in the pod. But also, yeah, it's very dicey. And as we have also said on this podcast, Mitch, I thought Rickea Jackson looked like one of the most improved players that in Unrivaled this winter.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why I hope the best for her. I really thought, at the very least, in the first week or so of the season, that the combination of her, Kelsey Plum being so ball dominant, but allowing Rickea Jackson to really stretch her game. I picked her as my silent assassin of the year, someone who I thought could really grow in her three-point shooting prowess because of all the pieces around her, especially once Cam Brink comes back. But now she may not even be on the roster if any of this is to actually be believed by the time Cam Brink returns in a couple of weeks.
Yeah, she was somebody, that I thought too, like had a great unrivaled season, and really as a rookie, like was really solid too. There's something weird going on here though, and I don't know what it is. I just read I guess Lynn Roberts addressed this yesterday, and she just said, Rickea is a big part of our organization and our team, and she's taking personal time, and we support her. We're excited to get her back when she's ready to be back. That is per the Long Beach press telegram. I just wanted to mention that, we've been down some weird roads with Rickea Jackson before. She was suspended by Kelly Harper at Tennessee for a couple games a few seasons ago. So yeah, there's a little bit of some history here, and I don't want to call it a pattern or anything, but we've been down some weird road with her before, and I hope everything's okay. But I just I don't know really what this means for her future with the Sparks or her future in the WNBA or really what's going on. But I certainly think she has the talent to be a really, really good player in this league. She showed that last year as a rookie, especially after when Cameron Brink went out and she kind of had to carry that team at times. And then in Unrivaled, I think she was really, really good. So if she can kind of put it together, obviously we don't really know what she's dealing with. I think that she can be a really good player for somebody. Will that be with the Sparks? TBD.
Before we get to this week's main event, I do want to tell you about our friends with the Sports Podcast Festival. Mitch, I know you'll be there at the Rialto in Raleigh on August the 23rd. Split Zone Duo, Ovius and Giglio, and Big Screen Sports, all on stage. Tickets are $59. There is also an option to buy a ticket and reserve your home field long sleeve tee. eTix or therialto.com to reserve your ticket and maybe get in on the action with our friends from Home Field and also get one of those long sleeve t-shirts too.
I'm wearing a Home Field shirt.
I figured you would be.
To the JMU Dukes and my buddy
Dukes.
Brian Reese.
Love it. Shout out to the Dukes. Shout out to Home Field. Shout out to the Sports Podcast Festival. Go check it out. Again, eTix or therialto.com. It is time for the main event, Mitch. Last week, we asked you what team you were most concerned about in the W. This week, my first question for you, we'll start big picture before we maybe narrow our search a little bit. What team are you believing in the most currently on this June the 2nd in the WNBA?
I think it's Liberty. I think coming into the season, I wasn't 100% sure if they could repeat as champions. I'm pretty sure that they're definitely capable of doing that now. They're 7-0. They, are at the top of the league standings. They lead the league in points per game by a sizable margin. They have stars on their team, plural, when you talk about Brianna Stewart and Sabrina Ionescu and Jonquil Jones. And I think Natasha Cloud has been a good addition for them. I think Leonie Fevich is playing well for them. Everything is kind of coming together for the Liberty, and they're off to an awesome start. I also really believe in the Minnesota Lynx and their ability to maybe even get back to the finals, and maybe we just see a rematch of that and run that back. But I think when you take those two rosters and compare them to each other, it is very clear that the Liberty have the more pure talent than the Minnesota Lynx do. Now the Lynx, maybe you could say, well, they play better together and they really, they have the better coach or whatever it is. Like you can make some cases one way or another. But I think the Liberty are the team that right now, if you ask me to pick who's winning it all, I would go with them to repeat as champs.
The Liberty's 7-0 record ties their best start in franchise history, according to ESPN Stats and Info. They also started 7-0 in 1997. The Liberty have outscored their opponents by 144 points, the largest point differential over the first 7 games of a season in W history. I go back to what I noted earlier, Mitch. This is last year's championship team evolved into a better shooting team from the floor. Again, not only did they attempt 19 threes in the first half in their victory over the Connecticut Sun, 152 over the weekend, they also tied their league record of 19 3-point shots that did fall through, 3-point shots made that they set earlier this season. And that is not something that we necessarily saw last season. That's where the Natasha Cloud influence, I think, comes in. Sabrina Ionescu being afforded an opportunity to play much more off the ball and have an opportunity to shoot from beyond the arc. And I think that this is the evolution of the New York Liberty. And it's why, for me, I would also select New York as my team that I believe I'm most confident in. But I also ask this: which of those two teams, the Lynx or the Liberty, the two lone undefeateds remaining in the W, which of those two will stay undefeated longer? So just for clarity, for the point, again, just for the listeners at home, depending on when you're listening to this, we are recording this on Monday, June 2nd. The New York Liberty's upcoming schedule reads as follows. They are at Washington on Tuesday. They then have a full week off before they host the Sky. They're at Indiana on the 14th, then host the Atlanta Dream. Meanwhile, for the Minnesota Lynx, they are in action Tuesday night, home against Phoenix. Then they travel to Dallas, to Seattle, home against the Sparks.
I think the Liberty will stay undefeated longer because I think the Lynx could get got by the Phoenix in that matchup. Maybe I think Phoenix is off to a really good start this season. Like if you're looking for kind of that second tier of teams, the Aces, I think, despite their 2 losses already on the season, we know how talented they are. You can kind of put them in that top slot. But like in terms of like, all right, how is the rest of the playoff field going to fill out and like who is kind of really showing proof of concept and like playing really well? You got to look at the Phoenix Mercury and the Atlanta Dream, who are both 5-2. I think both of those teams are capable of beating teams in that top tier. So yeah, I would bet on maybe the Liberty to extend their undefeated streak the longest.
Yeah, and the Mercury are doing it without Kalia Copper, who remains sidelined, right. And certainly the Atlanta Dream. We talked about it last week, Mitch. I think that Brittany Griner looks reinvigorated at times. Certainly Bree Jones' ability to shoot from beyond the arc is something that I don't think a lot of people realize she had that in her game. And here we are. But we said for months that we were fascinated to see what the influence of Carl Semesco and the reigning threes of Florida Gulf Coast, what it would be on the Dream. And it has resulted in a 5-2 record to begin the season. Surprising victories over the likes of the Indiana Fever, perhaps surprising, at home, on the road. And then they lost at home to the Fever and a home and home. I would put those two teams in that next tier. I am scared that I also want to put the Washington Mystics there because I feel like I'm a prisoner of the moment. I was also the one who sat here and said, what happens for the Minnesota Lynx if Courtney Williams just caught lightning in a bottle last year? What happens if all those other pieces around Fee Collier were just simply playing at their ceiling and it's unsustainable and ultimately they're going to regress back to the mean? And now they're 7-0. So maybe don't listen to my takes because whatever I say, the opposite usually happens.
Yeah. The Lynx are playing really, really well. There's a lot of buzzing around Fee Collier, for MVP. I think the jury's kind of still out on that. I think it's a little too early to call the MVP race, but certainly I think she's a front runner for it. Still leading the league in scoring, just a couple points above my pick, Kelsey Plum. So we'll see if those kind of even out over time.
Speaking of your picks, Mitch, I asked you this week, were you going to give us a chef's table, a viewing guide for this week in the W, or would you give us some picks in a special edition of Making Money with Mitch. You have taken those two, thrown them into a pot of stew, churned it all up into all sorts of goodness, set the table for us with this week's appetizer.
Yes, we are going to make money with Mitch at the chef's table. So
I'm
first
ready.
up, we have the Liberty at the Mystics, Thursday night, 7:30 p.m. Eastern on Amazon Prime. I like the Mystics to cover 9.5 points here.
We can't quit them. We can't quit Sonia Citron.
I just, the Lynx or the Mystics are at home. I think they've been playing really well. I think that they're also a team that's kind of playing with nothing to lose a little bit. Like, they're feeling good about themselves. And I think there's a chance that maybe they could keep it close to the Liberty. So, to keep it within single digits, I think that's a solid bet. I think that's a good one to make.
I also like it because this is the ultimate come back down to earth game opportunity after the Liberty drubbed the Sun 152. It makes total sense to me.
Indeed. Yeah, for sure.
All right. And this week's entree, let's hit it.
This is Saturday night, 8 p.m. Eastern on CBS. The folks at CBS are probably not going to be happy that Caitlin Clark is probably not going to play in this game.
She's not playing.
But the Fever are playing at the Chicago Sky on Saturday night. And I like the Fever to cover and win 5.5 on the road. I think that the Fever, despite not having Caitlin Clark, despite having all the problems that we've talked about on this podcast, I think that they have the better team and the better roster by a pretty significant margin. And I think that if their losing streak doesn't end before this game, it is certainly going to end in this game. I think they're going to come out with something to prove. Like, as much as people want to make the argument the other way, like, this is a rivalry with or without Caitlin Clark in it. I think that the Fever are going to, be a little fired up to play in this game and to prove something on national television.
I debated putting the Me Bounds, which is the new name that many are using for the Angel Reese missed shots that then she puts back up and in and gets both a rebound and a score. I debated putting that as this week's What's the Beef. I debated putting it in this week's Starting Five. I will simply address it here. I'm glad Haley Van Lith got playing time in the first half last week. The last time out for the Sky. That. How about that? I'm just here so I don't get fined. Let's hit some dessert.
For sure. This is next Wednesday. The Sparks are at the Las Vegas Aces, 10 p.m. Eastern on the CBS Sports Network. Another potential opportunity for a Kelsey Plum revenge game, though I think that this game is going to go like the first game went, where the Aces will win and win comfortably. I like them to cover 9.5 as they are beating the Sparks in Las Vegas.
Let's talk about Amazon Prime, CBS. Yes, the CBS network, not CBS Sports Network, although we've got that featured in this week's Chef's Table as well. No Baller TV, no Flow Sports, no Flow Hoops. We love all you guys, but this warms my heart to see on primary mainstream streaming services the WNBA in the spotlight. Well done, W. Well done, cable providers. Let's run through, just for those who may have missed it, the appetizer in this week's Chef's Table. Mitch has the Mystics covering a 9.5 point spread, albeit a plus 9.5 against the New York Liberty, the 7-0 Liberty, Thursday at 7:30 p.m. The entree, the Fever, a 5.5 point favorite. Mitch likes Indiana at the Chicago Sky on Saturday. And finally, next Wednesday, the Los Angeles Sparks, a 9.5 point underdog. Mitch likes the Las Vegas Aces in the desert next Wednesday on CBS Sports Network. It is time for last call. All those stories we missed, Me Bounds. I already hit you. We're not gonna get to the Me Bounds. Although I do want to quickly address this tweet, Mitch. This is from the official Sports Center account earlier this week. Icon behavior, star emoji face. In just 38 games, Angel Reese became the fastest in WNBA history to record 500 career points and rebounds. The Chi-Town Barbie passed Tina Charles, who did it in 44 games. I'm just here for the replies. It's fascinating to me with our discussion, and we did have one a couple weeks ago about this idea of, is Caitlin the villain? Is Angel really that much of the villain? Perhaps it's really, more of a shared role. The universal, and I think a lot of it is because of the Sky's ineptitude across their roster. A lot of the national conversation from the mainstream sports fan, I would argue, who casually watches the WNBA, has been this notion of, wow, like we got, like Angel Reese isn't that good. I'm not saying Angel Reese isn't a good player because I think the roster around her was poorly constructed. But yes, there is something to her game. Although, as we discussed last week, Mitch, I'm okay with Angel getting those junkyard dog rebounds and points, following shots to the rack, because that's not the style of play that her running mate Camila Cardoso plays with. And Haley Van Lith couldn't get on the floor for the first 2 weeks of the season. And so I don't know who actually was providing those sort of hustle plays for the Sky. So I get it, but the fact that that has now become the national conversation surrounding the Howard County native is rather fascinating to me.
Yeah, I think Angel Reese is a good player. I think it's just about like what style and like what do you want to watch, right? Like if Caitlin Clark is Steph Curry, Angel Reese is probably Dennis Rodman in terms of just like playing style, not all the off the court eccentricities and all that stuff. It's just flat out. I mean, that stat tells you. I mean, one of the best rebounders that we've ever seen in this league. Do a lot of those rebounds come off her own misses? Maybe they do. But she's getting the rebound nonetheless. I find it very interesting how Angel Reese has basically become like bait for engagement farming. I've seen this by a lot of like really big and like reputable Twitter accounts. Like the ones that you just pointed us to is from SportsCenter, is from ESPN. Like ESPN, you don't need to do engagement farming, right? I've seen some from like StatMuse and like some of these really reputable like statistic websites. Like one was about Angel Reese's shooting percentage, and she would have to make so many consecutive shots to have a career shooting percentage over 50%. And it was like, who had shooting percentages under 50% from the floor for their entire careers? Michael Jordan and Larry Bird and Kobe Bryant. And I don't know if anybody's ever heard of those guys. They're pretty good.
The argument to be made for those players, though, Mitch, at least 2 of the 3 were guards. And so they're not clogging up the paint. But I also think that is a misunderstanding when it comes to what Angel's game is. Mm-hmm. I think that there was this idea of she's a back to the basket center. She's not. She's a 4.
No.
And so that's where that 3-point shot that we've all been hearing about since her days at Maryland is going to have to come along at some point in time if she's actually to play that position to the best of its ability and be considered among the upper echelon of scorers at that position. Otherwise, yes, to your point, she's Rodman. And that's not to say that she can't be a superstar in her own right, because she makes hustle plays and she gets rebounds. But I don't think then, personality-wise, the clash between her and Caitlin, the history, I think that's always going to exist. But I don't think you could, at the very least in terms of scoring production, be trying to compare the two. I also think it's unfair because one is a point guard and one is a forward.
Yeah, one of them is, if we can even take this comparison to the 80s, Caitlin Clark is Larry Bird and Angel Reese is Kevin McHale. Just Kevin McHale, like not really fun to watch, but like does a lot of things really well. Kevin McHale and Dennis Rodman, Hall of Famers, by the way, did it a different way, did it their way, ran their own race. I think the stuff about Angel like missing her own shot and like her just being this meme and this tool for like engagement farming is the thing that's kind of bugged me a little bit. Like, I think it's okay to criticize players and critique players and stuff, but we've gone a little bit overboard, I think, by a lot of accounts and people who don't actually like follow the game all that closely.
Yeah, I was going to say it was more fun last summer when we were all just like, wait, hold on here. Like, are we now it's like everyone wants to talk about it. And I'm just like, okay,
right.
It is what it is. This is who she is. And that's okay. One more from me before Mitch hits a couple in last call. The Golden State Valkyries became the first WNBA franchise to ever have 18,000 plus fans at each of their first 3 home games. Mitch, obviously, much of this is a byproduct of the Bay Area loving basketball. It's a byproduct of the rise of the W over the last 2 to 3 years. But at the same time, shout out to the Valkyries. I wish the product on the floor and the roster construction was, a little bit more something as opposed to what we've seen, but they're feisty. I appreciate it. Shout out Kate Martin too. 14 points in the second quarter on Sunday night. We appreciate you, Kate Martin.
Yeah, shout out to Kate Martin. Shout out to the Valkyries. I'm very interested to see what they do. I know the season just started, but their off season is so interesting to me, especially when you talk about like how the CBA is going to get redone, and there's going to be a lot of stars that are free agents. And I think that is going to be an enticing place for free agents to go to and play.
Mitch, you have a note from the ATL. What say you?
Yeah, so this is just kind of a funny thing that I saw. Ryan Howard sent a tweet out that said, "My mama said we need a mascot," and she tagged the owner of the Dream, Larry. I'm just gonna call him Larry G because I'm gonna butcher his last name. Y'all know who he is. He owns the Dream, and he quote tweeted it and said, "As usual, your mama is right. It is high on my list, but as with other decisions we make, we won't rush it to get it done. We will do it right." Do the Dream need a mascot? What can the Dream's mascot be?
I love Ellie, but I want to kind of blame Ellie for this because Ellie has become so mainstream, is like out here at the Around the Horn finale. Like now everyone wants an Ellie. And it's like, no, maybe that's the Liberties. Like she is theirs. She is all of ours, but like she's one of one. And that's not to say the other mascots in the W aren't great, but at the same time, like, you can't force this sort of thing. Maybe it's because I went to a school that our mascot is the Bombers. We don't have an animal. We don't have a mascot. It's just the Bombers. Maybe that's why I'm just like, don't force it. We tried to once upon a time at Ithaca College. There was a vote before my freshman year. They were going to try to make the flying squirrel, the phoenix, or the lake monster, name it the Bomber. And that would be our logo. And after about 3-4 months, they decided, yeah, no, that's just weird. So that's why I'm like, hey, Dream, it's okay to be ambiguous and just be one word. It's cool.
The flying squirrel you can maybe sell me on that for the
That
Bombers.
was my vote. Yeah, I voted for the flying squirrel. Not a surprise.
We had at Salisbury, we had Sammy the Seagull. Very, very popular, very, very good guy. I think your point about Ellie, the elephant of the New York Liberty, I think she's kind of the WNBA's Gritty. Like she's, she belongs to all of us. And she is the W signature mascot, I think. I don't think the Dream need a mascot. I don't really know what you would come up with, like a walking peach, like for Georgia. Could you just have 2 Chainz come up to every game and he could be your mascot?
Outcast, as discussed on this pod before.
Yeah, only if Andre 3000 can bring his violin and his flute. And
maybe the violin and the flute are the mascots because we can dream. It's a dancing violin and a dancing flute.
Okay.
We're workshopping here.
You could just have Paul Millsap. You already work out in his gym.
Yep. I think he's a great mascot.
Cool. All right.
I'm here
we
for
solved
it.
We solved the problem.
Leave us a thought in the comments, whether you're watching on YouTube or you're listening wherever you get your podcast. What should the Atlanta Dreams mascot be? We'd love to hear from a couple of you guys before next week's show. Mitch, before we get out of here, what do you have cooking at SB Nation?
Not much right now, but last week I did have 2 W-related stories kind of from my time reporting from Minnesota when I went to those games out there. I asked Cheryl Reeve straight up if she had intentions and plans of being the coach of the U.S. national team in 2026 and 2028. And she gave me a non-answer as expected. She told me, I congratulated Sue. That's Sue Bird, who is now the what is her official title?
She is the Jerry Colangelo is what I refer to.
Director. She's the
Jerry Colangelo.
Yes, managing director for the U.S. Women's National Basketball Team. She said, I congratulated Sue, and that's been the extent of our conversation.
That should have been this week's What's the Beef of the Week. Man, I dropped the ball there.
That's okay. So you can read all about that, and listeners of the podcast will already know that I believe that the next coach of the U.S. Women's National Basketball Team is going to be Kara Lawson. And there's a lot of reasons why for that. Cheryl Reeve kind of giving me a non-answer there. It sort of tells me that she's probably not going to be the coach of the national team going forward, which would line up with the history of the national team. There's only been one coach of the national team that has coached that team in multiple Olympic games, and that's Gino Auriemma. Every other coach has basically only been there for one cycle. And I think that we're going to have the same with Cheryl Reeve. And then I think if you look at kind of your list of potential candidates and you weigh in also maybe the connections and the politics that go in with being a part of the national team, I think there's a lot of reasons why Carol Lawson makes a lot of sense. I'm not saying she should be the next coach in the national team. I just think that she will be, as we've stated before on this podcast.
Never a dull moment in the wide world of women's basketball. That's why you keep it locked right here on the Women's Basketball Podcast. He's Mitch. I'm Mia saying we will catch you next week.
Deuces.